Welcome to White Pill Radio, the roughly every other episode version of Theology on Air, which is a podcast put out by Theology by the Pint, which you can learn more about by going to theologybythepint.org. We meet every month somewhere in the Houston area. I was going to say Metroplex, but that's a DFW thing. But somewhere in the Houston area around craft beer, where we talk about theology, politics, ethics, all kinds of interesting things. And you do want to sign up for those events. You do want to be notified about them, and you do want to come, because for only $10 you get beer,
a cool program,
and for $5 more you get food. Theologybythepint.org is where you learn more about that. But because there's so much to talk about in the world and in theology, we have this podcast where we want you to subscribe, rate us, give us 5 stars at all the different platforms. It really helps us grow. And check out our clips, which we're starting to make now because we're young and cool. Again, doing that. But
that's how you know you're young and cool, when you say it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But since we have so much to talk about, we have to have the podcast. And White Pill Radio is where we have applied theology, ultimately hopeful, post-apologetic conversations where we talk about news and current events from a Christian worldview. I like to say that this is blessed talk, but not happy talk. It's also real talk.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I feel gripped.
Hang on. Yeah, that's what we're going for. Gripping conversations.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, so we're going to turn this whole God thing, and we're going to apply it to everyday life. That's the bottom line. So,
yeah.
Cool. I'm Evan McClanahan. I'm the pastor at First Lutheran here in Midtown Houston. And I am joined by the Grand Poobah herself of Theology by the Pint, Sarah Stone.
Sarah Stone Ulrich now.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Yeah, I'm the executive director. You can call me Grand Poobah if you want, but yeah. Hey, guys.
Yeah.
And we have someone who's been at a million of our events, has been on the panel a couple times, but has not ever joined us, I don't think, in the studio. So first, longtime listener. Jason, tell us who you are.
Ooh, gotcha. Well, now I have to
Like
figure
at your
that
core.
out for myself. Oh my word, this is like existential. Hi, I'm Jason Marino. I'm the pastor at Christ Memorial Lutheran over on the west side of Houston, and an urban planner with AICP in the local greater Houston area. So thanks for having me here, and glad to be a part of, well, honestly, just creating a lot of good conversations where we come at it, we say, hey, we'd love for you to know about Jesus, but at the same time, we're still all unique. I love the fact that different people have different ideas on that. So thanks for having me.
Yeah. We're excited.
Yeah. All right. Well, here's a very spicy topic,
Yeah.
Sarah. So why don't you get us started?
I actually heard this, and I thought it was a parody when I heard this on a podcast a couple days ago. Jasmine Crockett, she's a representative from Texas, suggested, well, she was giving a talk, and she said she heard it from a celebrity, but she didn't think it was such a bad idea, that we should make it so that Black people don't have to be taxed. They don't pay taxes. Mm-hmm. And what's funny, first of all, I think that's obviously sort of a ridiculous idea, that you would just take an entire population and say they're not going to be taxed because of something that happened, hundreds of years ago. And we don't need to get into all the nitty gritty about reparations. Maybe we can. But what I think is funny is that she went on to say something like, then they'll have more money in their pockets, and that'll help boost the economy because basically they know how to spend their money better than the government does. And I was like, preach, sister. That is true.
Yeah,
that is why
that's
we don't.
What we've been saying the whole time.
I guess she's a Republican. Anyway, I thought it was funny. Obviously, I don't think she's going to make that happen. But she's just such an interesting character. She's loud and she's sassy, but she says things like this that are kind of so ridiculous. But people are really listening anyway. See, I don't have any hot takes on it other than just, I guess, like, she kind of accidentally said the quiet part out loud there.
Politicians can say crazy stuff whether they do or don't want to follow through on it anyway. So, I mean,
that's
who
true.
knows? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, is there a such thing as good racism?
Good racism?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
I mean, well, it would be bad if we didn't allow Blacks to attend public schools. If they're segregated, right? Bad.
Yeah.
That's bad racism.
Yeah.
Good racism would be we target Blacks and say they don't have to pay taxes to right a previous wrong.
Oh, you're saying it's sort of reverse racism, but it's for good.
Well, yeah, something like that. I mean, obviously, the answer to that is no. I think it's a civil rights violation to do anything directly only for one person group. You can't have affirmative action would be an example.
Yeah.
And it's essentially been declared null and void by the Supreme Court. Colleges and universities are finding ways around it, but we believe that is a violation of the Civil Rights Act. Even if it is intended to help people of color, it's still a violation because ultimately you're going to have to preference then Blacks over whites. So now,
Yeah.
it's not a zero sum game. Like there's always going to be somebody harmed by
Yes.
by privileging by the government. So let's say, for example, the government needs to bring in $5 trillion a year of income. Okay. And blacks are 13% of the population. Let's just say they pay 13% of our taxes, and we still need to get $5 trillion in every year. And not, now they don't have to pay taxes. So does that mean that white people have to make up for that, or every other ethnicity? I mean, or we just say, well, we'll just keep printing money. That's actually the real offense at this whole thing. Was literally the government saying, especially if you pay quarterly taxes at the end of the year, you're settling up, you're starting to figure out like how much taxes do I owe. Like they're making you tell them how much money you owe the government. Meanwhile, they're like, oh, gee, golly, we fell $2 trillion short of our budget this year. We're just going to print it.
Yeah.
Well, if you can just print it, then why do I pay you?
Yeah.
Why? I mean,
yeah.
There's really not a good answer to that question. I mean, it causes inflation.
Yes.
But by Jasmine's by her logic, but when you take money from me, right, you're now decreasing my spending power that I would put into the government. I mean, I might go buy a new car.
Yeah.
But that would be good for Dodge, right? It'd be good all for the people who work for Dodge and all the people who sell homes to Dodge employees. It
yeah,
down
all the trickling. Yeah. I know one of the podcasters said she's basically Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't tell the difference at all. But but it's interesting. I mean, because it seems like there are two different parts that are being brought up in this regard.
Yeah.
I mean, one is reflection on issues of reparations, and truth be told, is that anything being done today could not actually qualify as reparations because it's a completely different setup. The reparations was really based on the idea that being a citizen in a particular area comes with some sort of like a basic starting point. Like you have some way in which you can interact with society, have some form of employment, but also caring for yourself, your family, and the like. That's why whenever the Civil War was over, they were talking about 40 acres and a mule is just to be able to, hey, you actually can have a means by which you can take care of yourself, your
kind
family,
of a blank slate almost.
be a productive part of society. And then the president, it was Johnson, and he was saying like, nope, never mind, took that back. So the thing is the difficulty back then is that whereas with different countries, not just the U.S. but Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Israel, in some ways, is that whenever you were in a country for the first time, you were given something to start with. And that could have been land, that could have been finance. But then you have a whole group of people that's in the U.S. that all of a sudden they have nothing. Yeah. And that's why they had to go sharecropping and tenant farming and other things like that. So then long term is that whatever's passed on generationally with other groups would not be passed along the same way that it would have been with one particular area. But the problem is reparations would have been at that time give them land and some starting point.
Yeah.
But nowadays, it's not the same thing. So things like this that are like, how do we deal with inequity? The problem is that they're trying to deal with something that was failed in the past with something that's really unrelated and maybe causing other issues that are untenable to deal with.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, and I agree.
Yeah, and the other part,
there have been people who try to figure out a right dollar amount to make up for 100 years of lost capital investment or whatever, right? And the numbers have been like the trillions and quadrillions and stuff. So it's you can't figure it out, So I don't know. It's a fool's game as well. I mean, these are points that have been made long before, but in part because every one of our descendants was a slave at some point. I mean, if you actually study slavery and you know that Romans enslaved people, and I mean, not even that long ago, and it could be that our ancestors came over by indentured servitude, which was in some ways better. It was temporary and things of that nature, but there was a portion of all of our ancestors' lives that were given in slavery. I'm not necessarily equating it. I'm saying that at this point, I'm not sure how this helps broker peace.
And I think it's really more maybe like an overall issue. Like, so for example, like, somebody had, ancestors in the Roman times that might have been like indentured servant or a slave. But then let's say that they're here in the U.S. and they're able to be given, hey, here's something to start with.
Yeah.
Okay, so the past, but then there was something to be able to say, now here's a way to kind of start fresh, but also start with 1 foot forward. Okay. And I think that's really is, but that maybe it's not just even one group, but maybe as a whole is that if we as a society in the United States of America did a pretty decent job of making sure that everybody had just, one good step forward instead of hoping that everybody just figures it out, then I think that while we made mistakes in the past that should have been done differently, at the same time, now we wouldn't have to get to these questions like, okay, now we're trying to fix it. Well, no, if we actually did a better job of making sure that everybody had 1 foot forward as they're moving forward, then, well, they still got to, handle their own life. They've still got to move forward in their own regard. But does everybody at least have a place to start with? And I think maybe that's a better question than taxes and all that stuff in that regard.
Right.
So
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, related was a tweet, an X post that Elon Musk put out. And basically, he simply said 4 words: no more white guilt. Notice that the W is capitalized. Because that's been still a whole thing where black became capitalized in 2020, but white was still lowercase.
I thought it was for Ron White. He's always guilty about things in his comedy routine, but okay.
Yeah. So this is a response to a tweet by Mario Nawfal, who has a pretty big following on X, which says, white guilt is dead. Gen Z is done apologizing for history they didn't write. And I think that's true. I think that generally speaking, after 2020, there's a certain segment of young American whites who basically feel like, you know what, we didn't start the fire. You know, to quote the great
We didn't start the fire.
And it's not our fault. We didn't do it. I'm not going to be held captive. I'm not going to be told that I did something wrong. And we basically are standing up and saying it's not going to work. The charge of racism isn't going to work anymore. The call for reparations isn't going to work anymore. Like, you know what? It's a free country. There are lots of successfuls, lots of very prominent examples of black people who've been very successful for 100 years. I mean, not just like yesterday, but for a long time. And so the opportunity is there. It is there. We still think it's the greatest country in the world to live in. So I think I think the tide is turning on that. I think it's very different if you look at where we were in 2020. There's a lot of people who are saying, we're just not going to do this anymore. We're not going to play this game. And I, for one, think that's a good thing.
I also do think it's interesting. There's a generational piece there. Like, just anecdotally, when I talk to people from different generations, it seems like the people that are most still up in arms about all of this stuff, it's not my kids' generation. It's the millennials. Well, yeah, the millennials. By the time you get to Gen Z, they're like, okay, are we still talking about this? Can we just be ourselves and live our lives? And,
Well, and the boomers who were kids when this went on, right? I mean, our parents, perhaps, definitely your grandparents, were alive when, there was segregation, during, when Birmingham riots or whatever were going on, when Martin Luther King made a speech in Washington, D.C. They're alive during all that. So they might have some guilt or feel like, well, we didn't do enough, and so we have to make it right now. But what we're saying is, no, it's not my fault.
Well, and I think, though, I would kind of look at it in a different light, which, surprise, surprise, I disagree with Evan. But with it, though, is I don't know that it's necessarily white guilt, because I think that term is meant to be very loaded. I think it's but by people of all different political stripes. I think in reality it's more a question of not are we responsible for the sins of the past, but rather are we looking at things that may have resulted from the sins of the past and trying to deal with them in a way that might be more like reasonable. So
compassionate.
But also even a spade is a spade. Like for example, if you've got somebody who they're behind on their taxes or something like that on their property, but for $5,000, now they actually have their property is taken away completely, sold at some ridiculously low price, and then they get nothing in return, when in reality, it could have been sold at a normal price instead of just, foreclosed, and they could have received the rest of the money and just paid the taxes that was there. At least they'd have the money there. But it actually happens statistically more often to people from black communities than from others. So the reason being is because of issues in regard to like generational wealth, or whether or not they were able to pay for the full part of the mortgage in the first place. That might be a question that would be discussed. It's not because the group here today was responsible for things in the past. But if we're looking at something saying, yeah, but there were laws that were written probably about like 60 years ago, or give or take, that were actually meant to, in different ways, deprive people that were of different racial minorities of property. And by putting in these loopholes that they could have it taken away, we haven't fixed them. We haven't actually looked back and said, wait, that doesn't make sense. And I think that's more of the piece here, is that if we look at things and say, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense, but because it doesn't actually bother me in my whatever status, then therefore I'm not going to worry about it. I think that's more the question, rather than whether it's whites who are guilty, as much as taking white, which is a misnomer in this regard, and talking about, well, those who are privileged in reality is what I would say more in that regard.
Yeah. Well, if you don't have to pay taxes because you're black, then you would definitely be privileged.
See, there you go. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a step back, though. Were you ever taught about compound interest in public school?
Yes.
Well, I would hope so.
Really?
Well, yeah.
I did in math class. Don't ask me to do it now, but I understand the concept.
Well, yeah, I also had to teach it, so yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't remember that being part of my education. I mean, those kinds of like money management sort of skills.
Sure.
Maybe in math class they talked about it, but as a math exercise. But I don't think we teach children how to manage money, how to think
for
about
sure,
money.
no.
Okay.
And so,
Yeah.
so the concept is that when a kid gets $5, he buys five. Well, you used to could buy 5 Hershey's bars with that. Now it's 2. Right. And so as that same person becomes an adult, they get $2,000 to work and they spend $1,000 on their what they need. They don't know how to save money and so on. I'm also remembering that Smithsonian, that very famous whiteness Smithsonian exhibition at like the Black History Museum, where one of the hallmarks of whiteness, and this was a critical thing, apparently this is bad, is essentially self-denial for the purpose of future enjoyment.
Delayed gratification.
Delayed
Yeah.
gratification, yes. Well, that's how you build generational wealth. And so I'm not going to be made to feel bad about the fact that that is what my forebears did. They didn't do anything wrong. My grandparents didn't do anything wrong by living very frugally, investing wisely, and going to work while they went to dental school, and all the hours that they put in. And by the way, all the free dentistry he gave to poor people throughout his whole entire career. I'm not going to be made to feel bad for that. Will not happen. In fact, if you try to make me feel bad about it, I'm going to have the other reaction. So I think a lot of people are in that situation where, look, like if we actually want there to be a more equal playing field, then we do need to start teaching people about generational wealth. And I do want people of all colors to build generational wealth.
Yeah.
And so we need to teach people kind of how it works, and part of it is having the self-discipline to not spend every dollar you ever make, but to, save some for a rainy day, to put some off to the side.
Well, I'm really glad that he was like helping people. He said he was a dentist. Was that? Yeah,
just as one example.
Oh, no, that's really great. I completely disagree with everything else you said, though.
Yeah.
With it is because, number one, is that there were like plenty of instances in which people who were Black, African-American, whichever term we wish to use, who actually had forcefully things that they had taken away. So, for example, Tulsa still deals with the long-term effects that they had an area that was like a Black Harlem for Tulsa, and yet then a large white mob came along and basically burned down all the businesses that they owned, physically took away things that they had, and now they don't actually have something to pass on to their kids as far as wealth goes. If we actually look at compound interest and the like, then what we acknowledge is that if you have a generation that has a certain amount of money, then over time that's going to be able to build, and you can then split it off to your children. But if you didn't start off with that in a previous generation, then based on compound interest, there wouldn't be nearly as much to be able to share later on, even if the later generations are working harder to do that. So actually, by definition, by not having the original generational wealth in the first place, it's not a question of whether people individually were trying to say, I'm going to do something bad to somebody else. If you see a system that ends up having struggles in that regard, then on the whole, it's still going to end up leaning toward one group rather than the other and making it more difficult. I mean, you could even look at things like, two people are applying for the same job, right? The exact same, resume. And then all you do is just take off the name, and it's like, oh, that's the exact same. Then you put the name on there. And if a name that's on there, something actually sounds like a Black name, so to speak, it's been proving statistically that they'll have a significantly lower opportunity for being able to interview. Until the last 5
years.
Maybe.
Hey guys, Sarah Stone here. Sorry to interrupt what I'm sure is a riveting podcast episode, but Theology by the Pint needs your help to continue providing these podcasts, offering our in-person events, and growing so we can bring thoughtful conversation and the hope of the gospel to a world that's increasingly walking away from church and from faith. Now that we're a 501c3 nonprofit, all donations are tax deductible, so we've crunched the numbers, and if each listener of this episode gave just $1 for each episode you listen to, we'd put a huge dent in our annual budget. So consider giving today. Go to theologybythePint.org/give and click the link to donate. Thanks so much. And now back to our show.
5 years is too short amount of time to measure in that long-term kind of regard. Statistically, you
Well,
can't.
I just think we have a lot of people from sort of the pulpit, as it were, saying, I'm going to choose the Black name. But Jason, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think what I would respond with is, the story from, say, Tulsa that happened is awful and terrible. And then that's criminal and should be legislated. But I am not guilty of what they did because I happen to have skin tone that matches their skin tone. So the white guilt thing, I think that's kind of the point, is just because my skin tone matches the skin tone of people that have committed crimes doesn't mean I've committed crimes. But to you, I would say, given something like that, because I agree now that person's taking a step backwards in what they're able to accumulate, what's the answer? What's the solution?
I think discussions about what it is that people, whenever they're basically high school into young adult, would be able to start off with in the first place. So, for example, there's an example that I think is positive, that is not really race-based one way than the other, is talking about first-time home ownership. So, like, for example, there are different programs where if you don't have a certain amount of money in the bank or a certain amount of funds, but also if you haven't had home ownership at any point in time in the past, as long as you're able to meet like certain standards of income and being able to keep it the long term, then it helps out with down payment assistance programs. So, like, for example, if you don't have this money that's in your background or something with your family, then at least it's an opportunity to start off with a house, something you'd be able to go in along with. That would just be one example.
Isn't that what subprime mortgage lending was all about, though? That led to the 2.8.
Well, it sounds like this is a little bit more vetting than that was.
Well, yeah, and plus you're discussing the idea of continuing to make sure that a single person is inside of something rather than trying to change an entire industry and creating a bubble that would come out long term. Plus, right now, many of the things that happen actually put many individual homes within corporations that end up renting them out and actually take away opportunities for home ownership. So,
but the idea that you just described has nothing to do with their race.
Right.
Because you could have a very poor person, white person, that also needs that same kind of assistance.
So historically, a lot of it ended up being where you would see a very strong divide. And to be fair, is that actually if you look statistically at correlations, is that different correlations that might determine whether or not you're going to have a good, like wealth or other possessions and the like, is that even though you can actually connect most outcomes with things like your job or where you started from or other things of that nature, is that being Black actually is a variable that is not correlated with other things by itself. So in other words, being Black by itself statistically actually does predict whether or not you're going to be in poverty even more than being Hispanic, Asian, anything else in that nature, even just starting out poor in the first place. So that's one of the things. It's like, well, ideally, yeah, we don't want, I want to hire you because you're white. I don't want to hire you because you're Black. Okay, that's very true. But statistically, you actually do still see correlations with that. So I think it's more the term itself is loaded and a very bad term right now because we're in a different position. So we need to have better questions. Yeah. So white guilt is a term that actually isn't helpful right now, but rather we need to ask the same questions today that we did 30, 40 years ago, just maybe a different term for it.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I think we have to move on. If
I think
time for everything.
This is an article I wrote at everyman.substack.com called "Thank You for Voting?"
Biased. He wrote it himself.
Yeah, I did. I published my own stuff here. And so I guess my basic question is, I give the anecdote of working on election day at a voting poll, which I'll be doing tomorrow. And it's frequently, we will say as those working at the poll when people are leaving, having voted, thank you for voting. And, at some point, having heard that, I don't know, hundreds of times, there's a part of me that says, well, why are we thanking people for voting? Isn't that an obligation? Isn't that a duty? And it seems to me like, with voting, especially, it used to be that we made voting difficult, perhaps even illegally so. Mm-hmm. And now we make every accommodation that every person can vote. And so my broader question is, should everyone be allowed to vote? Should we make it this easy to vote? Should we be essentially reinforcing through kind of these kinds of thankings, I guess,
gratitude,
these kind of manners, that someone is that we want them to do this, and I will say that this got published and one of my church members said, I can't believe the pastor of my church wrote this, that you wouldn't thank someone for voting. Like, that's just common courtesy. It's like, well, it's not like I thank people for everything. Okay. I think I say thank you a lot. And I think that Christians ought to thank people a lot.
I was going to say,
it's at the heart of
this is not the heart of your article, but I think you thank people for doing things that they're obliged to do all the time. You do this in your marriage, right?
Right.
Like, you've taken vows to promise to do something, but you still thank the other person for doing those things. But I do agree with this idea that there probably should be some limitations on who gets to vote.
Yeah.
I said it.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, because, in my polling location, I believe, as a de facto belief, that one view of politics is better than another, that 2/3 of the people there are voting against my interest.
Yeah.
That's just a reality. Why would I thank somebody for that? Now, I don't block the door with a billy club and say, I don't want you voting today because, you're going to, raise my taxes or, you're going to increase abortion or whatever the case may be. But I don't, and if they have a problem voting, like if they don't have their ID, I can do the paperwork needed to do a provisional ballot, or I'll do that. Like I said, if they're handicapped, there are all kinds of accommodations made for doorbells so that people can go out to their car and read them the oath and all this sort of thing. So that's all fine and good. My only question is, we're part of a political body, and we have certain duties and obligations. And this has kind of become blood sport because voting is where it's our voice. It's where we express our highest political will for what we think is best for everybody. So I guess I want to have a conversation around whether or not voting should be the sort of thing where, and this is a very impolitic take on either side. I mean, Republicans are going out of their way to make early voting easy and absentee voting easy, and they're, Turning Point and all these kind of groups are going around collecting all these ballots and because they're playing all that ballot harvesting game in several states where that's legal. And I'm like, I just think the way we do the whole thing is wrong.
Here's a question for you, sort of reversing your thought. You said it's a duty, it's an obligation, but we know that not everybody does it. Let's just say you got your way and people had to take some kind of a civics test or paid taxes for 5 years or something before they voted. Then should it be mandatory to vote if you qualify? Not because they're on your side, but just because they are a thoughtful voter.
I mean, it does sound, and I'm not saying that Evan is saying this, but it does sound like what he's saying goes in that direction. In the idea that, here's two choices. And yes, that is an extreme version. Sometimes you have more than two. Rarely.
Still.
But
yeah.
But with it, though, is here's two choices. You have to decide on one of them. By default, you're actually creating the situation of saying, well, I believe that one of those two choices is something I would want to do. And I know there's a lot of discussion of, it's like, yes, but you want the lesser of two evils. Well, let's say that you've got like 100 million people, right? And 25 million, 26 million vote for one person, 24 million vote for another person. 50 million people do not vote.
Yeah.
Would it be fair to say that 50 million would be a spot where a third option could genuinely come in and be able to appeal to them? What I would say is that a third option wouldn't even know that they would have a place to stand if all 100 million are forced to vote in the first place, but rather is, wait a minute, there's 50 million who don't actually feel comfortable with either of these. They're actually a space for me to come in and represent a third option. I think that the more that we turn it into saying it's an obligation to vote, or even if we try to make it mandatory, I think we actually take away something that we're able to study and learn from for a potentially better option than the two evils that we even have. But if we go on and on of you have to vote, and if you don't, you're somehow unpatriotic, I think we miss out on a great opportunity.
Okay, there's something interesting there. All I could think of when you were saying that was when we play Mafia, which is this silly role-playing game like a
Do
whodunit.
not play Mafia with Sarah. Just saying.
It's the best.
It's dangerous.
It is dangerous. But when we play that and we're all voting on who we think the bad guy is to try to oust them, we say everyone that's still alive has to vote. We don't actually kill people, but everyone that's alive has to vote because that is the only way that it works. And so I'm not saying that we make voting mandatory, but I do think if there was a way to hone in on the thoughtful voters on either side or all three or four or whatever. I do think that it should at least feel as close to mandatory as possible because this is what we need to make the country run the right way and so that we get somebody in office that is actually who people want. Now, I still think in all of the campaigning and everything, you can get that third choice. If people are like, man, these choices suck, well, that's great time for a third person to come along, but not voting that doesn't make that happen.
See, I think the fact that there's a term such as electability in today's discourse actually disproves that. Because in reality, whenever people are coming into these elections, they're actually asking this question of, well, we've got primaries and we want the person that we think that everyone's going to say yes to, not necessarily the best
person,
candidate,
yeah.
but the idea that, hey, this is a person who's going to dominate in a two-person race. So even like, for example, the idea that, wait a minute, I actually don't like this person, but I'm going to vote for them because I think that it's going to come down to two people. If there was some viewpoint that people later down the line would say, no, I don't want to just stick with these two, I think that electability would not even be as major of a factor. And I think people would be willing to say, I'm not going to vote for an evil, even if I think it's the lesser of two, but rather I'm going to wait for a better third candidate.
I get that.
Yeah. So
I realize we're not actually answering your question at all.
Well, no, I don't think voting should be mandatory in that sense. I think it's more like, do you have an obligation as a citizen to coach Little League? Yeah, you do. Should you be made to do it by the point of a gun? No, maybe you don't want to coach Little League. Maybe you want to volunteer in another capacity. But you have that obligation. It's the tragedy of the commons. If we don't do that sort of thing, the whole civic society breaks down. I think showing up is part of the difficulty. And, again, I don't think that voting locations should be put like at the top of a mountain, to only, weed out the truly most willing. But I do think that I don't think that voting is a right.
Yeah.
Some kind of universal right. I just don't. It's a sort of privilege that certain people with certain clout, and I mean that in the broadest possible way, they've earned that right. And it might just be that they did a year or two of civil service. It might be that they know enough. They know how many continents there are on Earth. I mean, the man on the street interviews are pretty crazy, right?
I know.
Where it's like name me a country, and it's like Texas, or something.
Well, they act like it.
Like I'm not sure that you should be able to vote if you don't know that you live in the United States of America, that there are 50 states, that we're on the North American continent. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I don't think that's unreasonable. Like I don't know why that person has access to tell me how much taxes I should pay.
See, ideally, I agree with you. And that's the thing, is that I agree that universally, like in some cosmic sense, the right to vote is actually not a right. It's an opportunity. It's a privilege. The difficulty is how we define that. And since we don't agree very well in our community, I'd say that's the reason why we haven't been able to make a defining line. So objectively, though, I agree with your concept completely.
Well, and we're probably already past the point of no return where you give so many people a right to vote, and like you can never get back.
Yeah, you can't pull it back
to that place of invested clout people voting again, because they'll always just vote in their own interest. I mean, it's the old joke of democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting on what to have for dinner. And once you get once it was 3 sheep and 2 wolves, it was fine, but 2 sheep died. Now it's 2 wolves and 1 sheep, and that's kind of where we're at. Where like you expand that's why they're trying to get 16-year-olds the ability to vote.
Oh, gosh.
That's the latest thing. So it's like because you get younger and younger until you can because they're whatever that you think that it's the same reason you would want to pack the Supreme Court. Because you're just building up numbers for one party control.
Lamb for dinner sounds delicious, though.
Well, I don't disagree with that. Speaking of one party control, Seattle has a new mayor. She is a socialist, not like it's a screed. Like she describes herself as a socialist. Her name's Katie Wilson. And she said the following recently. This is from a Tom Elliott tweet. She said, quote, "I believe you should be able to raise a family in an apartment, as I am, and that the city should be your living room and the park should be your backyard." And so what is she actually saying? Well, this actually goes back to, like, if you know who Le Corbusier is, he was an architect, brutalist architect, and his ideas for kind of like mass housing and like the Eastern Bloc, he was Parisian, but his ideas for mass housing and all of that were kind of used in the Eastern Bloc and Soviet style countries or Soviet countries. And so basically the idea is, well, who do you think you are? You get your 400 square feet, and if you have a family, you get 800 square feet, and you're going to be in this gigantic project like complex, right? And if you want a yard, there's the park, and if you want something nice, there'll be a shared commons or something to that effect. And so this is ultimately what communism or socialism are. Okay? Communism and socialism are not just about, the first step is to like have a, say, progressive income tax, as we obviously do in America, where people who can afford, to give more do, and therefore that's redistributed through programs like we talked about earlier, actually, the Great Society, various welfare programs, or whatever the case may be. But taxation, shifting so that the poor, therefore, get certain benefits, certain privileges, of not paying tax or actually getting cash money, from those who are paying tax. Well, that's like step number 1. Step number 2, because guess what? That's not going to solve the problem, as exactly what we've seen. The poverty level is the same as it was when we started,
or worse,
the Great Society. Even though we spent trillions of dollars to redistribute money, it creates all these bad incentives. It doesn't actually fix the problem for 1,000 reasons, which are pretty well documented at this point. So you just have to keep taking. You have to keep taking until there's just nothing left to take. It's kind of like, isn't that the giving tree, Shel Silverstein?
Yes.
Well, just keep chopping down the tree until there's nothing left to give.
Tree.
I know.
Yeah. So anyway, essentially, this is what socialism is, though. Like, on socialism, a person really doesn't have a right to a home. I mean, on socialism, a person with a 2,000 square foot home and a front yard and a backyard and their own car, that's really bad. It's really
selfish.
It's you're high up on the food pyramid or whatever, the eco scale, right? You're burning all this carbon, and there's a better way to live where you only get your 400 square feet in this gigantic apartment complex. I'm raising my family, says the mayor, in an apartment. You should be able to do that too. We gotta get rid of all this housing, all these single family homes. And at the park is your yard.
It's interesting because the way she says it actually sounds really nice. Because she says, "I believe you should be able to, not that
that's
you
how
should."
It starts.
I know, no,
Yeah.
I get it. It's surreptitious. It's like you could live in such a way that you do all of your sort of backyard living in the front yard, meaning like you do it in community. You go to the park, you rub elbows with other people. There's something lovely about that. So you
You've
think,
been in any parks in Seattle lately?
well, but that's my point, is that the way it's phrased is like, you could choose to take your kids to the park. Oh, that sounds nice. You could choose to let the quote city be your living room, like go get entertained by going out to shows and go out to eat rather than like, holing up in your own space. But you're saying it's not, this is the precursor to, this is how it ought to be.
For sure.
And that you don't get to have your own space.
Well, not to be too conspiratorial, but the Pacific Palisades burned to the ground in California.
Yeah.
That was like that fire that went through, right? And how many houses have been rebuilt? Let's see, I think one has been permitted since then. What are they going to do? Well, they're going to buy, developers are going to buy it up, and this is what they're going to build. They're going to build massive apartment complexes. That Palisades is gone forever. That's been widely predicted. Even though it was one of the most beautiful parts of Los Angeles, it was historical. You had all these like gorgeous bungalows, and it was very wealthy people lived there, and all of that. It's gone. They don't want that anymore. It's a socialist city, and it's better if people live in gigantic apartment complexes and they can just go to the park. But I was being rhetorical when I said, let me describe my train ride the other day.
Okay, tell us all
Because
about
I
your
had to
train
go
ride.
from my church to downtown to get my car registered. So walking to the train meant walking past a
lot of homeless people.
Yeah. And filth on the ground, and a fair amount of insanity. I think I can judge that from afar. A fight broke out while I was waiting for the train. Of course, I'm huddled with my back, looking around like my six all the time, because I don't want to end up a victim of violent crime.
Yeah.
And so I get on the train, and I'm immediately thinking, what's the safest place on the train? Of course, the train doesn't go downtown because they're doing construction, so we have to get off the train onto the bus. Literally crazy people with hands down their pants, on the bus. There was at least 3 insane people on the bus, which very slowly made its way close to where I lived or close to where I was going, and so on and so forth. Just to get downtown on a bus in this city or on a train is like, I would never allow my kids to do that.
Right.
And that's Houston.
Yeah.
The Bible Belt, the whatever. Like Seattle is like full of drug use in all these public parks. So this is what they do. Oh, you want a front yard? Too bad.
Yeah.
Bad for the environment. Go to the park.
Yeah.
Yes, there's 300 drug users in the park. Deal with it. That's what that's the kind of person this is. And so I reject socialism. I just want to note it. I don't just reject it because it's an economic failure, which it is. It's a cultural failure. They will take away your rights. Like all the things like this country is built on.
You'll eat bugs and like it.
Yes, you'll eat bugs. You'll like it. You'll be in the pod. And so that's ultimately what socialism is. You can only warn people so many times about it. And now they're voting for it in Seattle, and I think they're crazy. But.
You've said a lot there, which is good. With it is distinctions in socialism. There is democratic socialism and state socialism. State socialism is what we oftentimes think of as communism, even though the original idea of communism isn't, well, number one, hasn't actually ever existed, but also isn't even physically possible before Jesus returns again. And when he does, it won't be communism, it'll be his kingdom. Thanks be to God. With it, though, is democratic socialism being oftentimes what people are saying when they say, I'm a socialist.
Yeah.
So I don't know this particular person personally. I also don't know all the context behind that original quote, but what I do know is that by starting off by saying this person's a socialist, it actually flavors the whole rest of that quote. So it's like, I believe you should be able to raise a family in an apartment as I am. Does she mean you should do it in an apartment because you can't have your house? Or is it you should be able to raise a family in a place at all? I'm able to do that. I don't know. I don't know what her emphasis was. I don't know the rest of the context. Is she saying the city should be your living room, not that you should have a living room? Or is she saying the city should be your living room, as in not just the elite's living room? I don't know. Or the park should be your backyard. You shouldn't have a backyard? Well, Le Corbusier, the thing is that we can go back to some of the original architects and urban designers from the late 19th and the early 20th century and be able to discuss the fact that many of their ideas were coming into a place days where we were post-Reconstruction, and we had a lot of robber barons who had actually had no interest in taking care of anybody, anywhere, anytime. So going from I'm in
Really?
a slum,
You know how many libraries Carnegie built?
yeah, I also know that he didn't pay anybody. So yeah, I'd rather just pay people and
He didn't pay
yeah,
anybody?
yeah.
He had thousands of people working for him. He didn't pay him a salary.
Yeah. So if you're paying pennies on the dollar, then I don't think you can really count that the same as a salary. And with that is on top of it is even looking at Rockefeller, even looking at some of the other robber barons. I mean, I'm not coming up with an idea that's actually been historically demonstrated. So not needing to argue with that is what I would say is that if you want to go back to saying, does somebody have a place to live at all? Okay. Great. Now, is it enough? Well, no, not necessarily. I just don't know that we're coming into that saying that if Katie Wilson is saying you should have something, I don't know that it's the same as saying that she's saying you can only have this much. So you were saying a question.
Who determines what is enough?
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, do you think that in the modern politics today that it is generally on the left that wants to tell you how to live, or on the right?
They both do.
Okay. So like, was it the right pushing for like an end to, I don't know, incandescent light bulbs, or the left?
I have no idea what you're trying to get at. Yeah.
But I'm all.
Do you think
Maha
maybe,
loves
you think like maybe
incandescent.
the environmentalists like want like less energy use?
Oh, right.
You think like environmentalists want like to tell you how much like water, like actually Trump is like, I hate these like low, water pressure showers, Yeah, so do I. And so who pushed for low water pressure showers? Who pushed for these like, toilets with so many
Or no
buttons?
gas ovens.
You don't have enough water pressure to like actually flush the toilet, Yeah. Or gasoline, or natural gas being like phased out of New York City. Like no more new buildings will have natural gas, all electric. Like who pushes for that? The left or the right? I think we both know the answer to that, right?
Well, I would say that there are people that are pushing for it. And I would say that both parties are pretty broad. Otherwise, we'd be saying that everybody who's a Republican is exactly the same. And I'm pretty sure you would disagree with that.
Broadly speaking, the left pushes for all these changes. The left, do you find vegetarians to be on the left or the right more often than not?
I find them to be on the bottom of the food chain because they're weaker and not getting enough meat.
Okay. Why do they advocate for not eating meat?
I'm totally just messing. Yeah, absolutely. Why do they not advocate for, what was that?
For eating meat.
Because they don't.
What's the cardinal sin of a cow?
Methane production.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
You have to know where he's leading.
Yeah. I don't listen to everything Evan says. So okay, yeah, go for it.
Easy.
But please, no, tell me more. Explain a little bit more.
Okay, a cow is the worst thing because it's at the top of the food chain, right? So it takes a lot of energy to produce the meat that you get from a cow.
Is that a Hindu teaching?
No, this is an environmental thing.
I don't even disagree with it. It's just basic science. That the reason that environmentalists think you should not eat meat is because it requires more energy to produce the meat that you're going to eat.
Which has actually been disproven, but
okay, that I didn't know. But even if it were true, the right tends to say, "I'll eat whatever I want. Thank you very much." The left tells you how to live.
Interesting.
And so you apply that now to apartments. Okay. They tell you what kind of light bulb you can have. They tell you what kind of shower you can have. They tell you what kind of toilet you can have. They tell you what kind of gas range you can have. They tell you what kind of automobile you can have. These are all things that Trump is like repealing one by one. Oh, you can have gas in your house. Oh, you don't have to have the fuel efficient car. Oh, California isn't going to have electric only cars by 2035, or electric only semi trucks going into California. Those things are all being repealed by people on the right because people on the left are saying, we are going to tell you how to live. We're going to tell you how to get your groceries, when to get your groceries, what kind of food you can eat, what kind of food you can purchase, what kind of light will flicker over you while you're cooking your food. They want to control you from left to bottom. So maybe there's a context in which she is not acting like a state socialist, but I think that's exactly what she's doing. What she is doing is she is laying out a predicate for saying that you don't have the right to live in a 2,500 square foot home because of all the energy it uses. I mean, for example, the average electric bill in a lot of California is about $1,000 to $2,000 a month, depending on where you live. Well, why? Well, there's probably a lot of reasons, but one is they're punishing you. They don't want you to use energy. Using energy is bad. You know what I'm saying?
Well, maybe time will tell what she means as we see her, her reign going.
Keep her eye on Seattle. I mean, it could be a utopian paradise.
I mean, it's usually good to, figure out what a person thinks by letting them tell you instead of making assumptions.
Well,
but I mean,
Well, if we're ever going to get to, we have like 16 more articles to get to, so we gotta move on.
Okay,
you brought an interesting one, Jason.
N.T. Wright, Western Christians have misread heaven, the end times spiritual warfare. Now, especially is because there's been a lot of discussions that have happened within the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, which I've been a part of, which that's a whole other conversation. But But with it, though, is it resonated with this idea of that Christians are looking forward to escaping the world whenever they've died. Jesus comes back again, going off to be in heaven as this kind of like otherworldly place, rather than the idea that this world is actually transformed and that we are living within it. So the idea of restoring Eden, rather than we're disembodied and we're floating somewhere out there in the ethos.
I'll fly away.
Yes. Yeah. So with it is this idea that he's bringing up of how it's not only a reflection of things that we've kind of like leaned into with Neoplatonist tendencies that have come up, but also it ends up changing how we react to things. And because if we think of we're just escaping this world and trying to get away from it, not only are we less likely to care for it,
right? We can trash it.
Yeah, we can trash it. But also the other part of it is our decisions are not made as much of how are we caring for our neighbor as much as I'm just somehow escaping all this and I'm going to leave you all to your best devices.
Yeah, a little more individualism or something.
Yeah, in a sense. Plus, it's like you don't have to necessarily, and this is me adding this part of it, but I would say is that you're not necessarily even asking how would like Jesus want his disciples to live around other people. Instead, it's just this kind of idyllic of I hate the world. I'm going to destroy whatever I don't like about it, and doesn't matter whatever happens long term because I'm gone anyway.
Yeah.
So
I think probably I think I know the eschatology of everyone in this room. We would all agree that there are some certain theologies that lend themselves to that kind of I'm going to put my head down, deal with things here because I'm going somewhere better later, far away from here. And I love that N.T. Wright has brought some clarity to this, that we don't go off to this magical, mystical place, like you said, disembodied spirits, but God is going to, Jesus, when he comes back, is going to make the earth new and redeem everything here. This is our home. It's just not the way it's going to be one day. And I love that. And so I agree with 100% of what's in this article. And also, I think, interestingly enough, the pendulum has swung so far now, at least in the sort of churchy theological world, with N.T. Wright kind of helping calibrate people to the reality of what the Bible says. Now it is swung in such a way that we almost don't talk about the fact that you do need to be rescued from hell, and there is an afterlife, and heaven and hell are real. And I'll get to the Kirk Cameron thing in a second, but so much so that it almost gets into this kind of esoteric, nominal Christianity. Like, yes, God is good. He's going to make the earth new. He's redeeming things. I'm a part of that because I live a good life. But there's not, and I'm not saying you're saying this at all, but I do think there are people that take this as almost permission to just be kind of weak in their faith and not do anything, not go to church, not be part of a body of faith and participate and honestly, lordship. You know,
I wish there were more opportunities where I could say, we'll get to the Kirk Cameron thing in just a second. How many contexts would that be amazing? But I mean, to your point, I mean, you're right. One thing doesn't negate the other, like discussions on heaven, but we're not talking about like ethereal heaven, but the kingdom of heaven is still a renewed earth. And we should acknowledge, hey, if we're looking at hell, that's a whole other discussion, which we could get into annihilationism and other things like that, which I know that we do that at other times as well. What I would say is, for me, a concern with this is that oftentimes when we take ideologies that we hold to and then we turn them into things that I'm going to hold to an ideology. I'm not actually going to ask whether or not Jesus would actually be able to live out this ideology with his disciples in the new earth, but rather I'm just going to hold to something that's my idea, that's my ideologue, like that's what I'm with. But then Jesus is going to come back and fix it all. I think that this also needs to be asking what we live as the church on this earth should be a reflection of what we would want to see when Jesus comes back to recreate the earth. And I think that if we lose that sense, I think that also changes the way that we respond to the world around us.
Agreed. 100% agreed. I think one example of the kind of, I don't know, the thought that's in our zeitgeist right now about all of this kind of stuff is the next article we have, which is about, and I'm not going to read it, but Elon Musk recently in an interview was asked about his thoughts on the universe or God. And he said, yeah, I believe that something created everything. I believe in a God, in God.
Because we all care what he thinks.
Well, yeah. It is interesting who we look to Christians really want him to be a Christian, just like we want Jordan Peterson to be a Christian. You don't want him to be a Christian? We want everyone to be Christians.
I want him to believe in Christ so he's saved. I don't want him to represent Christianity.
Okay, that's fair.
Yes.
Well, we've got Kanye, so it's fine. I'm joking. Okay. But so he was asked about God. He said he believes God is a creator. And then he went on to say that he believes that Jesus had some really good teachings. He has not he has not given his life to the Lord. He is not following Christ. And one of the pundits I was listening to was saying, you like Jesus' teachings? You know, some of his teachings were things like, I'm God.
Yeah.
And I'm the only way to God. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And I think this is probably this is a very popular way of thinking. I think if you just were to interview 10 people when we leave here on the street and say, do you believe in God? They'd be like, yeah, I believe something made all of this. And yeah, Jesus is a nice guy and he had some good teachings. And I'm a good person, so that's it. Whereas, to go back to the N.T. Wright thing, I remember when I was little, my parents were doing this evangelism explosion, which no one would ever do this now because we live in a whole different culture. But you would evangelize people by asking them 2 questions. And one of the questions was, if you were to die tonight, do you know for sure that you would go to heaven? You don't ask those questions in evangelism anymore because people don't think this way. Right. But it's kind of a great question. Like, there is something eternal. It's true. And if it's true, it demands something of you. And then you work backwards from that. Well, what does that mean to go to heaven? What does it mean to be part of, as you say, the kingdom of heaven? Well, it means Jesus gets to be in charge of your life. Anyway.
And that's go ahead. Sorry.
Well, first of all, I don't know that we ever said the article from the Christian Post. So if people wanted to read it, but N.T. Wright, Western
he listed it. He said the title.
Okay, good. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't want to maybe go back on that, but N.T. Wright strikes me as one of these guys who's like too clever by half a lot. That's my critique. He's a scholar and he's got like 5 thoughts about every single topic. But when you need him to like come down, he's not there. Like
he's not there on abortion, that's for sure.
He's not there on abortion. He's not there on homosexuality. So when the world comes to the Christian and says, you have to decide in the name of Christ right now what you think about the killing of unborn babies, he's not there. Yeah. So he's not there for the fight, so I really don't care much what he says about other things. In terms of Elon Musk, I will say this is progress because he used to affirm, at least he dabbled with like simulation theory. Where, maybe we're just all in somebody's computer program and none of this is real and nothing's real and nothing really matters. And so if he is saying that he believes in God as a creator, then he's at least left simulation
theory. A step up. Yeah.
Now, the interviewer, Katie Miller, that's Stephen Miller's wife.
Oh, I didn't make that connection.
Yeah, and she's Jewish. So the issue of Christ isn't going to come up in that particular interview. The opportunity there was with the Babylon Bee, and we talked about that before, and they kind of dropped the ball there. But But you don't think Elon Musk would be like a powerful Christian to have, like a good person to have in our camp?
See, I love the fact that now there's this like soundbite of me saying, no, I don't want Elon Musk to be a Christian. That's all it's going to be. And it's like,
that's how it goes.
Yeah, because in reality, I really want him to believe in Christ Jesus for salvation, and that changes a person and actually determines it. What I don't want is for people to keep trying to take where he's at and somehow squeeze it into Christianity. Shoehorn it, because this is not Christianity. Christianity is saying that the Father who created us in His image has sent His Son Jesus Christ to die for our sins, to rise again for our salvation, and up there He sends His Spirit, and that we are empowered by that moving forward. That is not what this is getting at. And so that what I struggle with then is the idea of trying to shoehorn him, like you said, into Christianity, and that he could therefore be a representative. The thing is, if he
misleading people,
and that's the thing is, he's not going to be powerful for Christianity if he's not actually following Christ.
Sure. I agree. I think we all agree. Interestingly enough, looking to celebrities, I just want to say briefly, the whole Kirk Cameron thing. If you're in the Christian world, you've maybe heard there's this whole dust up because Kirk Cameron has sort of changed his thoughts on hell, and now he's warmed to or is an annihilationist. Or some people refer to that as conditional immortality. And all I want to say on that, we're not going to get into the different views of hell. You can go back in our podcast archives and find all kinds of things about that.
They're pretty good.
Really interesting. Yeah. But what is so interesting to me is that people are so up in arms about this. I mean, I keep seeing article after article in social media feeds about how dangerous and harmful this is. And I keep thinking, did I miss the memo that this is like a heresy? Like, there are plenty of Orthodox Christians that believe in conditional immortality. Some of them are on our own leadership team. Like, I'm kind of warm to it. I haven't, taken the full plunge yet, but it's not. I mean, and I actually Googled this to make sure. I'm like, is this a heresy? It's not a heresy. Meaning he's not saying I don't believe in the Trinity. He's not saying I don't believe Jesus is the Son of God or anything like that. He's just saying I have a different view of hell. Okay. Like, I just don't understand what the big deal is. And also, he is not some theological expert.
Right.
I mean, did the Left Behind series turn him into an expert?
Well, actually, he's rejected that.
Yeah.
He's more on N.T. Wright's side.
Interesting.
Good.
I didn't
That's
actually know
great.
that part. Yeah. But I mean, really, he got so much of it from Ray Comfort and from others. So it's like, just because he was a representative of something doesn't mean that he was the powerhouse behind it. So if he has some personal difference, that doesn't now change everything for everybody else. And I think that's the thing is like, if people said, hey, this person represented something about me before, and then they go off on a different direction, wait, I'm not ready for that yet. Then it's sort of like, wait a minute, now their change now has to have some
It has to
meaning
be
in
my
my
change.
life.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Well, I think what your average Christian sees this as a softening that will lead towards a liberalism or
Oh, like a slippery
liberalization.
slope.
Yeah, sure. You know, oh, you don't believe in hell. What else are you going to deny next?
That's fair.
You know, pretty soon you're going to deny, the divinity of Christ or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
I
Or the
also-
exclusivity of Christ. That would be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I also think that it bothers people. It bothers people that there are a lot of people that want to seemingly take away from God his sort of sovereign right to judge and punish evil and wickedness. And that's how they view annihilationism. It's like it's essentially a free pass. It's like like if yes, you cease to exist, but like that's not enough. Like for all the evil that you've done, and for all the the evil that you've done against God, like there should be a punishment for that. So it could be that it's just childish, right? It's like, well, mom grounded me for a week from doing this, but my little brother only got 1 day.
Yeah.
Whatever. And,
Perhaps.
It's a good point.
It could be.
I don't know.
I think at the end of the day, annihilationism is an assault against the holiness of God. And that's why I object to it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that at the end of the day, like if you believe that human beings are eternal beings, and if you believe that we have eternal souls, and that God has the sovereign right to judge for all eternity evildoers, and if there are enough biblical texts that indicate that eternal conscious torment is a thing. What my objection to his saying that, if I could say this, was he's like it's cruel and unusual.
Right. He's appealing to sort of this American ideal.
Yeah. It's like, well, God doesn't. We base our justice on God's standards.
Right.
He doesn't.
Not the other way
base
around.
it on
Yeah, it's not
ours,
like the
so.
Geneva.
I mean, I also I also oppose cruel and unusual punishment. But
if it's actually cruel, but yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? None of us even know what hell is like.
By the way, you made a presupposition in your statements that I think the conditional immortality people listening would be like, is that souls are eternal. I think the whole point is that the immortality is the gift. And this is why, Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden, and there's a condition now.
Yeah.
Anyway, not to get into the hell conversation, but just to say there are scholarly people that very much attribute holiness to God that would fall in that camp.
Understood.
Anyway, I know we're short on time. Do we want to keep going?
I mean, we can maybe mention really quickly, but I think the last one's the one maybe that might take more time, but personally, yeah.
All right, last word, Sarah.
Oh,
on the hill thing, right?
Sure. I just learned about this. I don't know how long this has been going on, but there's
maybe give a warning to parents.
Yes, if you're listening with little kids, you might want to hit the mute button or go to the next podcast, because this is PG-13 at least. But there is an app called Wiz, which is a terrible name for an app. It sounds like peeing, but whatever.
Yeah, it does.
WIZZ, the Tinder for Kids app. Exposes kids to predators. Congress must act, and I think it has now been taken off of platforms like Google and Apple, which is great. But it was created. It's basically a dating app, but it is for teenagers and adults, because you know how much teenagers need help with such things. And then, of course, as you can imagine, it was taken advantage of by perverts and gross people. And there was, multiple girls were assaulted, raped. If you look at the article, this article is from The Hill. All of the links go to definitive acts of sexual assault. And so then it was taken down, which is great. My thoughts on this are a couple things. One, to sort of take a page from Evan's book and be sort of cranky about this, I think we need to get back to a very because I said so approach with kids. That I don't think kids don't need everything that grownups have. If grownups have dating apps, and listen, I'm not anti-dating at the time I met my husband, but there are certain things that kids don't need to be a part of just because grownups are. So we don't need to be like, oh, well, we've got to make something for the kids. Secondly, I think we probably could have seen something like this coming because we have assigned kids all this crazy autonomy over their lives, given all of the conversation about gender and sexual preference. And we say things like, well, they've been telling me since they're 4 that they're really a boy in a girl's body or whatever. So of course we would then give them the opportunity to, have a dating app just like grownups, because they can know all about their own bodies and what they want and what they need, but they can't. This is the deal about children. They can't. The first article the first reference to assault is is a 12-year-old girl. My stepdaughter is 12. A 12-year-old girl who's assaulted by a grown man, 12 years old. They do not know. They half the time don't know what they want for dinner. They don't understand. There's a lot of things that they don't know yet. They certainly don't know anything about dating, nor should they be swiping left, swiping right. So it's gross that someone made it. It's gross that we got here because we think that children are grown-ups. And I say we lock the doors and get back to it because I said so mentality when it comes to kids. And we let them date when they're 18.
Whenever we look at something that's creating a product that has no real benefit but has all these detriments, there's no reason for it to be. We've already been able to establish as a society that anything below the age of 16 that is online with no restriction whatsoever is already going to be detrimental. But then now we're going to take that and lean it toward trying to promote having what's going to become a very physical relationship in some way, shape, or form before they're even at a point where they could even know what that would mean in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's you're going to take something that, number one, is loaded with all sorts of issues, doesn't have any strong benefit, and then not end up dealing with it. I'm just glad. Yes, I'm glad Congress is acting. But more than that, I think that every family needs to have this in front of them and stop just saying, my child does or doesn't want this. That's how I decide.
Right. And this isn't the only thing. You should be getting rid of Roblox. You should be getting rid of all kinds of nasty stuff putting in front of your kids.
How about criminal punishment for the parent?
Ooh,
They
interesting.
gave their kid the phone.
If there's negligence in that regard, then I can agree that.
Isn't there?
No, I'm not disagreeing. I'm saying,
I mean, why do the parents always get off?
Yeah.
They're 12-year-old running around robbing the neighborhood, 14-year-olds breaking into people. There's a story the other day, 14, 15-year-old kid breaking into a house, kicking down the door. Some 81-year-old lady shoots them, kills them.
Jeez.
And, then she gets sued for $1 million in a civil court for ending their life. I think she was found, not liable, but she had to go through the process of a trial and getting a lawyer to defend her and all that. Why aren't the parents of those teenagers responsible? Why?
Well, having teenagers, I think that there's only so much control you have over other.
But there has to be some demonstration of, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but phones?
No, I agree with you.
Because you can't even have a phone if it's not attached to your plan, right? It has to be attached to your Verizon, your AT&T plan. It doesn't really work otherwise. But you can destroy a phone. When you're not using it, you can password protect it.
Yep.
You cannot give them one until they're 18 years old.
Yep.
Those are all choices that you make. And
agreed.
So I am a little tired, if I'm being honest. It's and I'm just going to say it. There's been a lot of conversations around AI chatbots convincing kids to kill themselves.
Yep.
Okay. I feel for the parents.
Yes.
I'm not blaming the parents, and I understand kids do things without parents' knowledge, but at the same time, what goes on in your house
is your responsibility.
Yeah. And it's we go to the government to fix something that went on under your roof.
Yeah.
And there's a part of me that's well, don't give your kid a phone.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. Or don't whine to me about it.
Yeah. We're not expecting perfection, and we're not expecting you to have the power of God, but at least be trying, for crying out loud. Yeah.
Be a good steward of what you've been given.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I know time is up. So Jason, where can people find you?
Well, let's hear. I'm right here. No. So I'm over at Christ Memorial Lutheran, cmlhouston.org is where we post all those. But then also through that, any other media that's there, you can be able to link to it as well.
And he's at almost all of our events. Sometimes pouring beer or greeting, sometimes on the panel.
Absolutely.
And on the panel for our last event, which is on YouTube.
Yeah, it was fun. That was a great one. No, check it out. So I was amazing.
When we sang at the end, you definitely had the most robust voice, and you held your cup high.
Absolutely. All the harmonies.
Yeah.
And where can people find you?
Sarah Stone Ulrich. On Sunday mornings, you can find me at Oak Forest Anglican if you're looking for a church to try. But all the information about me and all the stuff we do with Theology by the Pint is at theologybythepint.org.
And I'm Evan McClanahan, pastor at First Lutheran, flhouston.org. Thanks for watching. Until next time, we encourage you to question freely, think deeply, and disagree as needed.